With the NBA season coming to a close, what should the NBA look to change this off-season? I'll bring you my ideas and more on this edition of The Nest. Hello everybody and welcome back to The Nest RXP. My name is Robin. After a very long sabbatical, at least for me, I'm so sorry about that. Just IRL things have been happening. It's been chaotic and I've been pressing a little bit, and it's been a struggle for me to get content out to y'all, especially with the Pelicans. So I do apologize in that regard, but we are here and we're going to be covering each NBA team and the NBA as a whole this off season. So starting off with the NBA, we got a lot of things to talk about with that, but first, before we get into it, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit follow, go check out the TikTok, go check out the Instagram, go check out all that. I'm going to be covering every NBA team, what I think they should be doing this off season, and just things like that. So if you want more of that kind of content, follow, subscribe, check it out. Maybe you'll see your favorite team and you may find an idea from your favorite team. So the NBA has a plethora of problems, and I think most people among like my community can agree that this is the weirdest the NBA has been in a hot minute. And I don't mean weird in a good way. I mean that the NBA has had a ton of problems, and honestly it seems that a lot of the problems only seem to be getting worse, especially with things trying to be fixed. And there's a couple things that I'm going to be talking about in this instance that I think can be fixed, but there's also just a ton of issues that can't be fixed. For example, injuries, like we just saw Dante DiVincenzo. At the time I'm recording, Dante DiVincenzo, I can't say his name. Why am I failing to say Dante DiVincenzo? Thank you. Dante, he tore his Achilles. He's the fourth number 0 to tear his Achilles, and sixth person in the last 2 years to tear his Achilles. So that's been a trend that's been struggling, that the NBA has been struggling with a decent bit lately. So keep an eye on that, but I don't know how much you can change with that. That just comes down to some bad luck. That comes down to conditioning things, and it ultimately comes down to games played and things like that. But we are going to be talking a little bit about those types of things, but not too much. But the first thing that the NBA is definitely looking towards and is definitely looking to fix is tanking. And I think that's the biggest issue that it's kind of been a debate between NBA teams, NBA officials, and just NBA fans. Because on one side, there's going to be NBA fans that, or even between NBA fans, there's been this debate. There's one side of NBA fans that are they hate to see tanking as a whole. They hate to see what the Utah Jazz, the Sacramento Kings, well, not so much the Kings, but what the Pacers, the Jazz, what these teams have been doing this season and last season to promote tanking. And then there's people on the other side, and I more so fall into this section of the belief, and obviously if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You can feel free to debate me in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I'm a firm believer that every sports organization, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, or whatever league, they are going to have bad teams, and those bad teams need a way to get better. And if they're not allowed, now obviously I don't agree with tanking. I don't agree with the idea of intentionally resting or intentionally doing whatever to get losses, but I am a believer that if a team is truly bad, they deserve a good pick, which is why I strongly disagree with this system that Adam Silver and the NBA Board of Governors is promoting to fix tanking, which is the full 14 team flattened lotteries or 18 team lottery or something like that. I hate that. I personally hate that, because what it's going to do is going to create bigger issues, and we've been seeing it these last couple years, because a ton of teams already have. First off, the NBA rigs the lottery. That's one thing that just needs to stop. I'm not saying this. I'm going to preface this. I am saying this not as a fact. We do not know factually that it is happening, but among most of the NBA community, we can kind of see that the NBA does, at the very least, have some sway over the picks in the lottery and things like that. And first off, I do think that should stop, obviously. But I also know that it realistically is not, so everything I'm saying after this is kind of a moot point. But if it were to stop, or if it just so happens, and again, I don't know, if it so happens that the NBA actually is not rigging the lottery at all, and this is literally just the odds playing the most fun game on NBA fans that they can, cool. Regardless, it doesn't matter. The ideas I have to fix tanking, it mainly comes down to just tweaking a little bit. So what do I think the NBA should do? So the first thing I think the NBA should do is to, one, make the lottery drawing public and not just be a private thing with the board of directors and things like that, or not the board of directors, the NBA owners, things like that. It should be a public event. It should actually be like, you should actually see the balls appear. And if you need to do it behind closed doors, I get it. I completely get it. But I think as a fan, it would benefit us to actually see it happen. But regardless, I do think the NBA should go back to using the lottery balls that they used to use. I don't know what they use behind closed doors. Obviously, I think they still use the lottery balls, or they use some kind of automated generation thing. But I think that the NBA should just go back to the old style with the lottery balls, simply because it's so much easier for the plan that I have in place. It's so much easier to put that in place with lottery balls rather than doing something else. So what is that idea? No NBA team can get back-to-back top 3 picks in subsequent lotteries. What does that look like? Looking back at this past draft and this coming draft, you obviously have the Dallas Mavericks, the Spurs, and the 76ers as the top 3 picks. Those were the top 3 picks last year. So those 3 teams cannot, and obviously they, other than the Mavericks, Spurs and Sixers wouldn't be in the lottery anyways, but if they were in the lottery, they would not be allowed to get a top 3 pick. Their odds are their ping pong balls from, regardless of what place they were in the rankings, regardless of that, those balls would just be removed from the first, second, and third lottery machine. That would increase the odds evenly for all the other teams and ensure that there is some parity going on in the league, where that you don't have the Spurs, for example, or the Thunder or the Mavericks getting every single pick every single year. So that's one thing I think the NBA should do. It would also help because if a team like let's say, the Mavericks obviously got the first pick last year. They didn't really tank for it. They just kind of got injured. And this year, kind of the same thing happened. They tanked a bit, but they were also pretty injured. So this year, they would not be able to get another number 1 overall pick and essentially pair AJ Diabata or Darren Pearson or Cam Boozer alongside Cooper Flagg, because that would be overpowering. That would be too dominant in theory. But I understand where the issue, many fans may have a problem with that, just because they like to see these super teams, they like to see these young teams develop, and it may not matter as much, because typically you'll see 5th picks and 6th picks and 7th picks turn into these great players as well. I completely get that, and I do understand why this no top 3 in back-to-back years may be a bit controversial, but I think it would be very good to help promote equality, or at the very least equity, among all the NBA teams, and I think that's what should be done. Another thing that I think the NBA should do to fix tanking is simply just do what they keep doing, and that's just fining teams, fining them more than just $50,000 though. Don't make it simple money fines, make it actual punishments. So I propose a 3-strike system, and it would look something like this. If you rest the player and there's no injury given, or there's no medical reasoning, and you do it for 2 or 3 games, then the NBA can investigate. And if the NBA determines that they are resting purely for tanking reasons, then you get strike 1 and you are fined $50,000 to $100,000, or whatever the NBA punishment is. Whatever the base punishment is now, that's what strike 1 would be. Strike 2 would be, you would lose, again, if same thing happens, if you rest players, or if a player is out for a significant period of time and there's no real injury given or nothing like that, then the NBA can implement strike 2, which is loss of a 2nd round pick, and it's the most recent 2nd round pick that the team has. So regardless of if it's your pick or just a pick you acquire from someone else, if you have a pick in, say we're going into the 2026 draft and we're in the 25-26 season, and you get caught for strike 2, you would lose whatever 2026 pick, 2nd round pick you have. That's strike 2. Strike 3, you kind of guessed it, you lose a 1st round pick. And that's the punishment that I think NBA owners need to be aware of, because if the idea of tanking proposes the risk of losing the pick that you're tanking for, that's going to discourage people from fully tanking. It's going to people are going to be bad. People are like teams are going to be bad, and there's going to be times where teams just like don't have personnel to be good. So I don't want to punish those teams, but if a team if a team is good enough to be at the very least a play-in team or at least be like an 11th seed or something, and they are actively tanking to try and get the 8th, to try and get the best odds or whatever, in my opinion, they deserve to possibly lose those picks. So I think this will discourage it just a little bit. So let me know what you think about that idea as well. The next issue that the NBA has kind of had an issue with is the 65 game minimum rule for awards and things like that. And they've specifically had this issue with Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic because they obviously got freak injuries at the end of the season. They couldn't meet that 65 game minimum. And there's a lot of hubbub, a lot of debate about that. And I think there's a pretty easy answer that a lot of teams or a lot of people are proposing. Stop basing it off of games, base it off of minutes. So for example, if you play 25 minutes a game for 65 games, which is the idea, that's 1,625 or 1,625 minutes right there. Just make the minimum 1,600 or 1,700 minutes in order to be eligible for NBA awards of any capacity, and you're good. That's it right there. The only exception I can understand is if it's the 6-man rule, in which you can lower it because obviously 6 men, they don't play like the full 30 minutes or 35 minutes a game. They can just be like a flat 1,400 or something like that. Regardless, that's a simple fix because it still gets to the point, because you will still have players who play the majority of the season anyway, while also giving some leeway to the players who just have freak injuries and have the ability to come back. And truth be told, if a team, being real, you may look at this and be like, well, teams are then just going to play their stars 40 minutes a game and get them knocked out, get them knocked into eligibility early in the season and then just rest them for the rest of the way. That's true. But guess what? Teams can still do that anyway with a 65 game minimum rule, which they're not going to because no one's healthy enough to do that nowadays. But a team could, in theory, just play, say the Clippers. The Clippers could just play Kawhi Leonard for the 65 games right at the 20 minutes mark, whatever. And then after that, just rest him for the final 17 games. They could still do that, which is why I like this idea better, because one, it gives that leeway, but it also kind of lets teams decide how they want to manipulate the NBA, because the NBA and the NBA rules are manipulated anyway, and you can manipulate them. So given the option to manipulate that best fits the fans and best fits the teams, I think is the best way to handle this. So let me know what you think about that down in the comments below. And the final thing that I think the NBA should look into is the challenging rules, because I don't think this is a big issue that a lot of people have been talking about lately, and I think it's mainly just a niche thing that I've noticed, and I'm curious to see what you fans also think about it as well. So the challenging rules are the current rules are this. Each NBA team gets a max of 2 challenges. If you win the first challenge, you call a timeout and hang on. So the challenging rules are this. So the NBA's current challenging rules are this. Each NBA team gets 2 possible challenges, and you have to call a timeout in order to challenge your play. If you win the challenge, you possibly get your timeout back. However, if it's a mandatory timeout, then you don't get it back anyway. So it's basically causing a timeout possibly either way, because typically teams challenge early in the quarter when it's going to be a mandatory timeout anyway. So that's stupid in my opinion. But if you lose the challenge, then you lose the timeout, and you lose the ability to challenge for the rest of the game. That's fine in my opinion. But if you win the challenge, you only get 1 more challenge afterward. That I don't care for. And I don't think it needs to be a drastic change. I think it just needs to tweak just a little bit, kind of give it a little more freedom for the coaches and allow them to take bigger risks with it. So here's what I think the challenge system should look like. Each NBA team should be allowed to challenge without it costing timeouts, unless it is an unsuccessful challenge. The only time it will cost a timeout is if it is an unsuccessful challenge. And you can have, I don't want to use the word unlimited because teams will then just challenge every single call. But I do think that like a large number, maybe like 2 or 3 challenges a quarter or 10 or 12 for a game, some arbitrary number like that. Have that set number, and teams can just continue to go through that until they are unsuccessful or until they simply run out. Which, if a team runs out of 12 challenges, that's some bad officiating. But this idea also just puts more pressure on the officials. That's why I like this idea. So here's how this would look. First quarter, say it's my New Orleans Pelicans. I'm going to say my New Orleans Pelicans and the OKC Thunder. Let's just say that. SGA goes to the rim. He supposedly gets fouled by Herb Jones. And James Borrego challenges the call. He's like, hey, I don't think that was a foul. Challenge. It's successful. He wins that first challenge. He doesn't lose a timeout. He loses nothing. He simply moves on. It's a changed call. At the end of the quarter, similar thing happens. James Borrego's like, okay, that's definitely not a foul. He challenges this one, calls the timeout. This time it is unsuccessful. He loses that challenge, so he loses the timeout and he loses his ability to challenge for the rest of the game. But if he was successful, he would have another opportunity to challenge. Next quarter, though, because if the arbitrary rule was 2 per quarter, 3 per quarter, whatever. I like this idea. It gives a little more freedom. It puts more pressure on the officials, which I think is necessary. But I also think that it allows teams to challenge with some freedom, so they're not hesitant to challenge. Because I think a lot of coaches right now are like, they're either super eager to challenge or they're super hesitant to challenge, especially if it's a ticky-tack call or if it's something that's not going to be super beneficial. But I like this idea. I also like the idea of changing it so that, I don't know if this is the official rule or not, but if there's any change in the call, then it's automatically considered a successful challenge. Regardless if it's just a change in who got the call, if it's a change in what the call specifically was, if it was like on the floor, while in shooting motion, something like that. If there's any change at all from the on the court to the after the review, then it's a successful challenge. And that's my opinion. The only exception is if there is a proximate foul on your team. So if you challenge an out of bounds call and it did not actually go off of your team's player, but your team's player did get a proximity foul or approximate foul in the process, that would be an unsuccessful challenge as well, in my opinion. But let me know what you think about that, because I like this idea a lot. I think that this idea could help the NBA's officiating a lot better. It could help coaches a lot, but I like the idea. I like the idea of opening up challenges for teams to actually use, so it's not so much a commodity, but more so a resource that they can actually use. So let me know what you think down in the comments. But yeah, I think that's about it for this edition of the Nest RXP. I'm going to be going over every NBA team, what their offseason will look like. I'm going to be doing some teams before the lottery, simply because they just don't have picks or their picks are kind of irrelevant. But stay tuned for that. If you want to see like teams in the lottery or teams that are in the lottery and their predictions and their offseason, things like that, stay tuned until after the lottery, because I'm trying to wait until then, because a lot of that is based off because a team like the Nets, for example, them getting the first pick or them getting the fourth pick, it changes their trajectory a lot. So I need to keep an eye on that. So I'm going to wait for that. But stay tuned for that. I will be doing my New Orleans Pelicans soon, because obviously we don't have a pick. Don't remind me we don't have a pick. But we don't have a pick, so I'll probably be doing them relatively soon. So stay tuned for that. And thank you all so much for watching. Again, I'm so sorry about the long delay on getting these episodes out. I promise there will be a lot of episodes coming out for each NBA team as the offseason goes on. And hopefully next season as well, I'll be able to get more episodes out. But we will see once that time comes around. But thank you all so much for watching. And till then, man, take care.